My parents threw a grand party for my sister when she got accepted into a prestigious dance academy, but called me an embarrassment for starting my own business. And my dad slammed a mug on the table. "You're not cut out for this. Watch me," I said quietly. 3 months later. "You're not cut out for this," my dad muttered, gripping his coffee mug so tightly I thought it might crack. The mug hit the table with a thud that echoed in the kitchen. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly wishing she was anywhere else but present for that conversation. I swallowed hard, looking down at the half-eaten toast on my plate, then quietly said, "Watch me." And that was it. That was the moment everything changed. Not because they suddenly believed in me, but because I realized I didn't need them to. I've always been the quieter sibling. My name is Rowan, and I'm 26. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, in a well-off but emotionally lopsided household. My dad, Roger, is the kind of man who likes to measure success in titles, salaries, and square footage. He talks about hard work like it's a badge you wear for others to see, but only when it comes with a business suit or a corner office. My mom, Marianne, is more passive but just as image-conscious. She hides judgment behind concerned smiles and offers help you don't want with conditions you'll regret. Then there's Bianca, my younger sister by 3 years. She's always been radiant. Popular, confident, a natural performer. Since she was 6, she's been dancing, and it was obvious early on that she had a gift. My parents leaned into private lessons, recitals, and summer intensives. It was all about helping Bianca get to where she needed to be. And to her credit, she worked hard. When she got into the Joffrey Ballet School in New York last year, my parents lost their minds with joy. They rented a private event space downtown with chandeliers, a seafood tower, live music, and personalized cupcakes. My dad gave a toast. My mom cried. People from 3 different states drove in. It felt like the world stopped to recognize her achievement. And me? I stood in the back of the room and smiled politely, pretending I didn't notice that nobody had asked how I was doing. Not one person. At the time, I had just launched a business I'd been dreaming about since college, a handcrafted stationery and journaling brand called Stillwater Paper Company. I had been designing and printing sample products in my room, doing packaging trials, sourcing eco-friendly paper and inks. I wasn't just playing entrepreneur. I had a plan. I knew what I wanted: to create a line of intentional, beautiful products that helped people reconnect with their thoughts in a digital age. When I made my first month's revenue just over $3,000, I was quietly ecstatic. I had built it on my own. No loans, no favors, just savings and sweat. I was proud. So I sat my parents down at the kitchen table and told them. And they looked confused. Not angry. Not even unimpressed. Just baffled. Like I'd told them I was going to the moon. "That's not a real job," my dad said eventually, shaking his head. "It's cute, but this is a hobby, not a career." Then came the mug slam and the line that's still etched into my memory: "You're not cut out for this." And just like that, the small, delicate bubble of hope I was holding burst. But I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I just lowered my eyes and said quietly, "Watch me." I didn't mean it to be dramatic. It was all I could muster. But something inside me clicked in that moment, like a gear finally locking into place. I knew I was done trying to prove myself to people who didn't want to see me. What followed was probably the most exhausting and fulfilling 3 months of my life. I threw myself into the business like it was the only thing holding me together. I woke up at 5 a.m. to respond to customer messages and emails. I spent my days working, designing, marketing, shipping. Nights were for learning e-commerce tutorials, SEO strategy, photography tricks to make my products stand out. I reinvested almost every dollar I made. I improved packaging to make it feel like an unboxing experience. I reached out to small influencers in the journaling and planner space, offering free kits in exchange for honest reviews. Slowly but surely, orders started picking up. I began hearing from people across the country who resonated with my mission: teachers, therapists, wedding planners, moms, even a couple who had lost a child and used my memory kit to write letters to their daughter. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about honoring the part of me that had always been quiet but persistent. The part they ignored. 3 months later, I landed a spot at the Charleston Artisan Market, one of the largest handmade markets in the region. It was a big deal, not just because of the exposure, but because it marked the first time Stillwater was moving from the digital to the physical world. I poured everything into preparing for it. Designed a booth layout, made new packaging, even handcrafted a sign from reclaimed wood with my brand name painted in soft sage green. I almost didn't tell my parents. But some foolish part of me still hoped. So I sent a message. Simple. Polite. Just an invite. I didn't hear back. The morning of the market was humid and bright. The setup took longer than expected, and I was sweating buckets before the gates even opened. But once they did, the response was unbelievable. People stopped by, complimented the booth, bought products, asked questions. A couple told me they'd been following me for months on Instagram and drove down just to meet me. I was mid-sale when I saw my parents, Roger and Marianne, standing near the booth, looking uncertain. They didn't say anything right away. My mom gave a small wave. My dad stayed behind her, arms crossed, scanning everything. I didn't approach them. I kept doing what I was doing. I let them watch. And what they saw, I think, surprised them. They saw customers. Real people. Smiling, interacting, pulling out wallets. They saw a woman buy 3 journaling kits and ask me to sign one as a gift for her daughter starting college. They saw a boutique owner from Savannah give me her card and talk about stocking Stillwater in her store. And they saw the cash box. Full. When they left, my mother muttered something about how nice everything looked. My dad just nodded. He didn't say anything at all. I didn't need him to. That night, I totaled up over $11,000 in sales. My largest day by a mile. But more than the money, what stayed with me was the quiet pride I felt driving home. Not the kind that needs applause. The kind that tells you, no matter what anyone said, you kept going. That drive home from the market was one of the quietest car rides of my life, and yet my mind was absolutely roaring. I drove with the windows cracked just enough to let the salty Charleston breeze sweep in, carrying the lingering scent of wood shavings and eucalyptus from my display table. The city lights blurred a little through my windshield, partly from exhaustion, partly from the tears I hadn't realized I was holding in all day. Not because I was sad. Because I had finally done something I wasn't sure I could do. I had stood on my own feet, under the scrutiny of the very people who once dismissed me, and didn't crumble. I thrived. Still, I didn't tell anyone the final number I'd made that day. Not my parents, not Bianca, not even the friends who had been cheerleading me from the sidelines. Something about keeping it to myself made it feel more sacred, more real. Like it was mine and mine alone. The week after the market, things shifted in subtle ways. I noticed my father beginning to linger longer in the room when I mentioned work. He didn't ask questions, but he didn't leave either. Once, I caught him watching one of my Instagram reels on his phone, pretending he was just checking emails. It was one of those videos where I wrapped a journaling kit in parchment, tied it with a ribbon, and added a wax seal with the customer's initials. It had gone mildly viral. I didn't say anything when I saw him watching it. I just went on preparing tea like it didn't matter. But it did. My mom asked, "Are you still doing that little business thing?" I smiled. Yes. And it's not so little anymore. She blinked, processed that for a beat, then nodded slowly. You know, she said, your aunt in Asheville was looking for unique wedding favors. I could mention your shop. I was polite. I said thank you. But the truth is, I didn't need her to mention me anymore. My orders had increased to the point that I needed help. I ended up hiring a college student named Alina part-time to help with packaging and shipping. She was majoring in design and loved hands-on work. She reminded me a little of myself at that age, quiet, observant, more comfortable around pens and paper than people. Bianca called more often now too. New York wasn't what she had imagined it would be. The academy was strict, grueling, emotionally draining. She missed the structure of high school, the adoration, the safety of being the hometown star. Once, she called me crying from her shared apartment in Brooklyn. Her roommate had eaten her food again. She had been scolded by her instructor for gaining 2 pounds. Her knee had been bothering her for days. I thought this was my dream, she said. But maybe I was wrong. It wasn't satisfaction I felt at that moment, it was something closer to recognition. The ache of disillusionment, of realizing your plan might not save you from pain. I didn't throw her words back at her or remind her how she used to dismiss my own ambitions. I just listened. Bianca, I said, gently, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to stop. She sniffled. You didn't stop. No, I admitted. But that doesn't mean we're built the same way. You're allowed to pivot. You're allowed to heal. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Maybe ever. Meanwhile, I was slowly outgrowing my setup at home. My bedroom had become a warehouse. My closet, a supply room. I was stepping over boxes every morning, printing shipping labels in the kitchen, and using the dining table to sort inventory. It was getting ridiculous. I knew I needed space. Something small, quiet, and manageable. Somewhere close enough to home for convenience but far enough to feel like a fresh start. That's when I found a tiny studio space above a flower shop on Cannon Street. It wasn't advertised online. I'd walked past the for rent sign one afternoon and called on a whim. The rent was reasonable. The light was amazing. The floors creak in a familiar, comforting way. When I told my parents I was signing the lease, my mother's first response was, "Are you sure that's smart right now?" My dad looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. I just said, "I've done the math. It's time." They didn't fight me. They didn't offer to help. But they didn't stop me either. Moving into that space felt like shedding a second skin. I painted the walls a soft blue-gray, strung up warm lights, set up a work table by the front window, and filled the shelves with products I had designed with my own hands. I bought a small sofa, hung up an old typewriter poster, and added a speaker for classical music and rainy day playlists. I opened the windows every morning, watered the plants, and started my day with tea and a quiet sense of triumph. I still saw my parents occasionally. Sunday dinners, birthdays, holiday gatherings. They asked polite questions about the business, still hesitant, still unsure. But the sharpness was gone. The judgment had dulled. Whether from fatigue or resignation, I didn't know. One afternoon, during a cookout, my father was speaking with a neighbor who had just retired. I overheard him mention me casually, almost offhand. "Rowan's doing some kind of online stationery company," he said. "Custom stuff. Seems to be working out. She's got her own office space now." It was barely more than a sentence. But it was the closest thing to praise I'd ever heard him give me. And maybe that's all I needed for now. A few weeks after that cookout, something unexpected happened. I received an email from a regional wedding magazine, Southern Bliss Quarterly. I thought it was spam at first, but it wasn't. The editor had stumbled upon my products through a wedding planner's Instagram reel, and they wanted to feature Stillwater Paper Company in their upcoming Southern Creatives issue. They asked if I'd be open to a short interview and a photo shoot in my workspace. I stared at the screen for a full minute, rereading the email over and over. I even forwarded it to Alina to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. She replied within seconds, "You have to do this." So I did. The photographer came to the studio on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I had barely slept the night before, second-guessing every corner of the space, every design choice. I wore my favorite linen overalls and a loose white shirt, the same outfit I wore when I made my first prototype journal. She took photos of me tying ribbons, dipping stamps into ink, arranging flat lay displays on the big oak table by the window. We chatted while she worked, and I told her about the inspiration behind Stillwater, how I'd always felt overwhelmed in loud, fast spaces, and how I wanted to create something that invited people to slow down, to reflect, to feel. The article came out a month later. There was my name, right under the header, Rowan Langley, founder of Stillwater Paper Company, the Charleston artisan who turned her quiet brand into a brand. I didn't show my parents the article right away. I wasn't sure I wanted to. But somehow, they saw it anyway. My mom brought it up at Sunday dinner, holding the glossy magazine like it was a foreign object she didn't quite know how to interpret. "You're in this," she said, laying it on the table in front of me. "Someone at my book club mentioned it. I didn't know they were doing a feature on you." I nodded, not sure what to say. "It's very nice," she said eventually. "You look so professional." I almost laughed, but I just said, "Thanks." My dad didn't comment. But when I got up to refill my glass, I noticed the magazine open again beside his chair later that night. He was reading it. Slowly. Carefully. His brow was furrowed in that familiar way that meant he was thinking. The next week, my sister came back to Charleston for a short break. She looked thinner, sharper around the edges. There was a heaviness to her I hadn't seen before. We sat on the porch one afternoon with iced tea, watching the street below. "Do you ever miss being the normal one?" she asked me. I raised an eyebrow. "You know," she continued. "The one who just follows the map. Get the job. Follow the plan." I thought about it. About what it might have been like to be the daughter who went to law school, or became a teacher, or got a corporate job with a benefits package and an office potluck calendar. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember how miserable I was pretending to want that. She nodded slowly, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. "I don't know if I'm going to finish the program," she said, almost too softly. I looked at her, surprised but not shocked. "You don't have to prove anything," I said. She smiled just a flicker and leaned back against the porch column. Later that night, after she went out with friends, I found a half-written note in her old bedroom upstairs. My name was at the top. She hadn't finished it. Just a few lines, scribbled in pencil. "You never made me feel like I had to be perfect. Thank you for that. I see you more clearly now. I'm sorry it took me so long." I folded the note and tucked it into one of my journals. I didn't bring it up. Some words are best left to breathe on their own. As fall settled in, business didn't slow down, it sped up. Holiday orders started rolling in. Alina's hours doubled. I hired a part-time calligrapher for special wedding projects. I added a limited fall collection of warm-tone notebooks, gold-foiled gratitude prompts, hand-pressed botanical print cards. They sold out within days. I was no longer just running a side hustle. This was a real, thriving business. And for the first time, people around me started to act like they believed it. One evening, after dropping off a wholesale order at a local boutique, I walked into the corner coffee shop I used to sit in during my college days. The barista, one of the younger guys who had started following Stillwater on Instagram, lit up when he saw me. "You're Rowan, right? From Stillwater? I got my girlfriend one of your reflection kits. She's obsessed." I blinked. "Really?" "Yeah," he grinned. "She said it was the best gift I've ever given her." I walked out of the shop stunned. Grateful. A little teary-eyed. Back in my studio that night, I stared at the original prototype journal I had made nearly a year before. The one with uneven stitching and smudged ink. The one I almost threw away. I'd kept it as a reminder of where I started. I ran my hand over the cover and whispered to the quiet room, "We're doing okay, huh?" The walls didn't answer. But they didn't need to. I didn't set out for revenge. Honestly, I didn't even know I was still angry. The funny thing about disappointment is that it doesn't always show up as rage. Sometimes, it lives quietly in the walls of your chest, a dull throb you learn to ignore until something brushes up against it just right. But that fall, something did. And it came wearing khakis and a forced smile. It was my father. He showed up at my studio one Thursday afternoon, unannounced. I was knee-deep in holiday prep, ribbon rolls everywhere, sample cards scattered, shipping labels printing non-stop. Alina had just stepped out for a coffee run. The door creaked open, and there he was. I didn't say anything at first. Just looked at him, waiting. He cleared his throat. "Didn't know if you'd be here." "I'm always here," I said, without emotion. He looked around. Took in the soft lighting, the organized shelves, the faint scent of lavender and wax seals in the air. "This place is impressive," he said. I didn't reply. After a pause, he spoke again. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something." I leaned against the counter. "Go ahead." He rubbed the back of his neck, an old habit when he was uncomfortable. "We've hit a bit of a snag. The real estate office, it's not doing so well." I blinked. Of course. Turns out, the housing market dip had hit them harder than expected. The boutique agency he'd built with his two partners was bleeding money. Contracts had dried up. Two of his longtime agents had left to start their own firm. And now, my father, the man who once slammed a mug and told me I wasn't cut out for this, was standing in my space, quietly drowning, reaching for something to hold on to. "I've been thinking," he said. "You've built something strong here. And maybe there's room to collaborate." I tilted my head. "Collaborate?" He gestured vaguely. "You've got the online thing figured out. The branding, the design, the sales. Maybe you could help us pivot a little. Freshen up the image. Digital marketing, content, that kind of thing." I studied him for a long moment. Here was the man who had thrown all his weight behind Bianca's every pirouette, who dismissed my dreams before they had even been voiced aloud. The man who never once asked how Stillwater was doing until it appeared in a magazine someone else handed him. And now, he needed me. And not just as a daughter. As a professional. "I charge $140 an hour for consultation," I said calmly. He blinked. What?" "For content strategy, brand overhaul, social media development, $140 an hour. That's my rate. If you want a proposal and quote, I can email you by Monday." His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He hadn't expected that. I could tell. Maybe he thought I'd be flattered. Maybe he thought I'd say yes out of some desperate need to finally be included. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was no longer the silent shadow at the back of Bianca's party. I was the woman who built a business from scratch and filled a studio with light and purpose. Maybe we'll talk about it," he said stiffly. "You do that," I replied, turning back to my packing table. He didn't stay much longer. Just stood there a moment, said something vague about how proud he was, and left. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt done. Christmas that year was smaller. Bianca decided to stay in New York, claiming rehearsals, but I suspected she just needed space. My parents hosted the usual dinner, though this time I brought Alina as my guest. My mom tried a little too hard to be welcoming. My dad mostly kept to himself. After dinner, while the others cleared dishes, I noticed something new on the living room bookshelf. It was one of my journals. One of my fall collection sets, still wrapped in its box. There was a handwritten tag attached, from Rowan's shop. Marianne's favorite. It hit me then. Not as a slap, but as a quiet, long-delayed wave. They were trying. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the apology I once dreamed of. But it was something. A small, awkward admission, like a first handshake after a silent war. I could live with that. A week later, I received a message from Bianca. She had decided to leave the academy. Her knees were getting worse, her mental health was slipping, and the spark just wasn't there anymore. But she wasn't lost, she was applying to graduate programs in arts education. She wanted to teach. She wanted to help young dancers find balance, not just discipline. I think I used to dance for them, she wrote. Now, I want to dance for myself. You helped me see that. I stared at my phone, reading the message over and over, smiling through the tears I didn't expect. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's a quiet studio above a flower shop. Sometimes it's a packed market stall. Sometimes it's a rate card and a polite, professional boundary. Sometimes, it's someone who once called you a failure, needing your help and you giving it only on your terms. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is just living a life so full, so unapologetically yours, that the people who doubted you have no choice but to stand back and watch. And wonder how they missed it.